The first female chair of Ways and Means and one of the longest serving female MPs in UK parliamentary history, Baroness Dame Eleanor Laing has achieved many firsts. A true trailblazer for women, in this episode of Her Voice in the House, Baroness Laing discusses her journey from student politics to the Speaker's chair, the difference between the Commons and the Lords, and how she's inspiring women to stand for public office. Welcome, Baroness Laing, to Her Voice in the House. It's great to have you with us today to share your story. As we do with all guests, wondered if you could kick off just by introducing yourself, sharing your background, and if there is one, a defining moment that led you to where you are today.
You think giving your name is a simple matter, but I have in a very small space of time progressed from being Mrs. Laing to being Eleanor Laing MP, to being the Right Honourable Eleanor Laing MP, to being the Right Honourable Dame Eleanor Laing MP, to being the Right Honourable the Baroness Laing of Elderslie DBE. And I want to make sure that in amongst all of that, Eleanor doesn't get lost.
Well, you wouldn't dream that would happen for a second, would we? Is there a defining moment that led you to where you are today?
Well, I suppose, you see, I've been around such a long time, there have been a few defining moments. The first defining moment was being appointed Special Advisor to John McGregor, who was then Secretary of State for Education in Margaret Thatcher's government. The next defining moment was when I was selected to be the candidate for Epping Forest. That happened in December 1995, and then I remained the MP for Epping Forest until July 2024. So that's quite a big chunk of my life. The next defining moment was when I was elected a Deputy Speaker in October 2013. And then I guess the final defining moment was when I was appointed as a peer, so that I'm now in the House of Lords. So over a lifetime as long as mine, there can't only be one.
No, it's hard to pick, isn't it? Really? And what was it that inspired you to pursue your career in politics and public service? Was there a particular moment or a person that...
Well, I suppose the really important thing there is that it's due to my father, who was a district councillor for most of my early life. And so I was brought up just assuming that it was important to take responsibility not only for your own family, your own business, but to take responsibility for the rest of the community and to do things that helped people who are less fortunate than you are, or indeed all people, actually. And my dad was very involved in local politics for decades, and he was the kind of person who was a natural leader. In everything he went into, he ended up running it. And so we talked about politics at home from very early in my childhood, and I just found it normal to be interested. Then, of course, I developed my own opinions, and when I was at Edinburgh University studying law, I got involved in student politics, and I didn't think that I would have the courage to stand for election, because that seemed to me to be quite a daring thing to do, to put yourself out there and risk being criticised. And when you're 21, that's a bit scary. But then I discovered that somebody for whom I had very little respect was standing to be president of Edinburgh University Union. And I didn't think she'd be very good at it. And nobody else of any standing was challenging her. So some of my friends said, well, why don't you do it? And I thought, oh my goodness, if I don't do it, this person who I really don't think will be very good at it will get it. And that won't be good for the students, it won't be good for the standing of the university, it won't be good for women standing for office, because she'll show that actually a woman is not very good at it, so I better stand. So I stood, and then it becomes addictive.
Yeah.
I discovered that I loved elections. I loved standing for election. I got posters printed, I got badges made. I went to the hustings and I made speeches, and people threw things at me, because that's what happens in student politics. It's much more exciting than here.
You threw them back?
I probably should have. But it was all very lively. I didn't stand as a Conservative, I stood as an independent, because at that point the Conservative Students' Organisation was very right wing. This was in 1980, sure. And so I stood as an independent, but I clearly was a Conservative, and so being anything other than a member of the Socialist Workers' Students' Organisation made you stand out as something different at most universities in 1980. So I won. I won by quite a clear margin, and that feeling was really exciting, and that never leaves you. Never leaves you.
And I'm sure you had that same feeling when you stood for Parliament and coming here, and that was the first step on your journey, which is wonderful.
Well, of course, it was much tougher when I stood for Parliament. It was still very difficult in the early 90s for a woman to be selected for a so-called safe seat for the Conservative Party. It was really difficult. When I was elected in 1997, there were only 5 new women, and there were only 13 women altogether. In the Conservative Parliamentary Party in 1997, there were 13 women. So being one of 5, it is pretty difficult.
Yeah. Who were the newbies at the time? I think Theresa was...
Theresa May is the most obvious and outstanding one. The others were Caroline Spelman, Anne McIntosh, and Julie Kirkbride. So there were just 5 of us.
Yeah, and of course you obviously serve in the Lords now with Theresa, Baroness May. So
yes, indeed, and Theresa's been a brilliant politician. She has, Theresa has been such a good feminist. She has never stopped standing up for what is right for women, and of course she's done it in a conservative, principled way. And when you think of the work that she did, for example, on modern slavery and on equality, it was really important and it made a difference.
Yeah, her legacy still lives today, which is...
It certainly does. She achieved a lot, and she mustn't be underestimated for that.
Absolutely. So your parliamentary career has seen many milestones. So I've written some of these down here. Yes. First female chair of Ways and Means. You had one of the longest tenures in the Speaker's chair, and one of the longest you were one of the longest serving female MPs in UK history. Perhaps you could share with us a few highlights during that time in the other place, because it certainly was, from my experience working here, we've never seen anything like it, have we? So I imagine for you, on another scale.
Well, you're making me think about 27 years all at once. I'm thinking about the highlights, and there are obvious ones. The first time I went into the Speaker's chair was really quite something. You step up 3 quite steep steps to get to the Speaker's chair. And Lindsay Hoyle, who's now Speaker, but who was then Chairman of Ways and Means, was very kind in showing me the ropes and teaching me what to do. But the first time I actually stepped up those steps, I thought, oh my goodness, this feels like, this feels like where I'm meant to be. That's how it felt. I loved it. Except that first day, I felt like Alice in Wonderland. You know that bit in Alice in Wonderland where she drinks the potion and she becomes very small, and the illustrations in the children's book show this small girl in a big chair. Well, that's how I felt. I felt like I was terribly small and this chair was terribly big. But of course, I got used to it over the 10.5 years when I had the privilege of sitting in it.
Yeah.
And those were great 10.5 years. That very first day, Lindsay stood with me for about an hour, making sure I knew what to do. That was like going down a ski slope with somebody holding your hand. And then he said, "Okay, you're on your own now." Off he went, and I'm going to have to do it. But it was more than fine. I so enjoyed being a deputy speaker because I think that the way in which we make laws is as important as the laws that we make, because the process by which legislation is formed is what gives it its legitimacy. And sometimes people on the outside look at how long it takes a bill to pass, or how many debates and amendments there have to be on certain pieces of legislation, and they say, "Oh, this is so silly." It isn't silly. It really isn't silly. Okay, there are some historic names for parts of the process, but put that aside. When you break it down, the way in which our Parliament introduces legislation, considers legislation, and passes legislation is thorough, careful, and actually very good. And therefore, the laws that we pass have legitimacy. And therefore, the vast majority of the population respect those laws and pay attention to those laws and don't break those laws or rules. And therefore, the position of the occupant of the chair is an important one, because the occupant of the chair oversees the way in which the House of Commons behaves and makes sure that procedures are adhered to and that laws are passed with due diligence. That's why I wanted to be a deputy speaker, and that's why I enjoyed it so much.
I think, I remember that time we were watching the proceedings, and I think you always sort of had that gravitas. You think you need that strong personality and someone who can command the authority of the House in that way.
It's sometimes difficult to get the balance between being authoritative and being bossy. And of course, it's much more difficult for a woman. Of course it is. Because if you exert your authority as a woman, men who don't want you to exert your authority over them will say, "Bossy so-and-so." Well, worse words than that, but it'll be bossy something or other. And they will be cruel and try to put you down, whereas a man exerting authority is just doing what men do. Which is why it's difficult to keep that balance. It's not all that difficult. You learn to keep that balance, and I hope that I did display gravitas. Certainly, I didn't ever find it difficult to keep order in the House. I didn't find it difficult at all, because I think that it shows that people respect you if you respect them. And I don't believe in shouting at people or undermining people. I'm not suggesting that the current speaker does that. He doesn't do that at all. He keeps order with a light touch and with humour and with authority. His predecessor was a different matter, but let's go there.
Indeed. So moving on to where you are now in the Lords, how did you find out that you were being made a peer? Because some of your colleagues have shared some very unusual ways in which they were told that they were coming to the other place. So
Mine wasn't. Have people had unusual ways? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I guess mine was fairly usual. I was just coming out of a meeting about 2 years ago, and my phone rang, and I glanced at it, and the name on the phone was Rishi Sunak, and I had answered it before I thought, "Oh, I wonder why the Prime Minister's calling me." Or because it didn't say Prime Minister on my phone, because Rishi's number had been in my phone long before he was Prime Minister. And that was Rishi phoning to say if he recommended me for the Lords, would I accept it? And it took me about half a second to say, yes, please, that would be great. Thank you very much, Rishi. Great. And we had a very good conversation that day when I said to Rishi that I would be very, very pleased if he recommended me for the Lords, and that I would undertake to not, some people who've occupied the Speaker's chair become a crossbencher. But I said to Rishi, I absolutely don't want to do that. I want to support you, and I want to support the Conservative Party. And I promise you that if I go into the Lords, that I will do that, and I will take it seriously, and I'll work. And I do take it seriously. I don't think I would have accepted it if I just wanted the title and wanted to go running around doing something else. There's an important job to be done in the House of Lords, and I feel very honoured to have been asked to become a member. And I do take it seriously. I come here most days, and I'm determined to work. It's not nearly such hard work as being an MP.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, my next question is, how did you find that transition then from the green to the red benches? Was it a bit of a shock, or do you feel that the foundations were in place from your time in the Commons?
Well, it wasn't a shock because I'd had some time to think about it before the 2024 general election. And then I left the Commons in July 2024, and I came in here in October. So I had been preparing by then, and I know it's different. And I think the mistake that some former members of Parliament, some former members of the House of Commons make is coming into the Lords and think that it's just a mirror image of the Commons, and it absolutely isn't. It has a different purpose, it has a different modus operandi, it has a different composition, and a completely different atmosphere. I knew it would take a little time to learn that, and so I spent my first few months not saying very much, but just absorbing it all. And I hope I have now learned how to do things in the manner of the House of Lords. Perhaps not. I still sometimes jump up and make a political point, and I can hear people going, oh. But there are some times when it's appropriate to make a political point, I think.
I don't disagree. And what do you enjoy most about sitting in the Lords? Is it, your fellow colleagues? Is it the different way that debate is structured? The kind of the refining process of looking at legislation?
It's definitely not the two latter things that you mentioned, because I in all honesty, believe that there are some of the processes in the Lords that could be made rather more efficient, without losing the essential character of the upper house, the second chamber. But I'm not ready yet to take forward those ideas. Well, I think it's the wrong thing to do, to be the new girl and come in and say, oh, you're doing all this wrong, or you could do that better. That doesn't appeal to me. I think you have to wait for a while to learn how things are done, why they're done that way, and then look at how they might be improved. Not by making them a mirror image of the Commons, but by looking at the procedures in the Lords and seeing how they could be improved. But then that's the situation in any organisation. Any organisation you care to mention only survives by changing incrementally, not huge changes, just little bits of improvement here and there, to keep up with the times and to just improve the way in which they're run. There isn't any organisation in the world that can't be improved little by little. But you asked me what I like about the Lords, and the simple answer to that is, it is full of really fascinating people. By definition, everybody who sits in the House of Lords is here because of what they have previously done. And that includes the hereditary peers, who are an amazing bunch of people. And I will be sorry, very sorry, to see them leave this place, because they bring a wealth of experience in different walks of life, because they're here for other reasons. But most people are not here because they're politicians. Most people are here because of what they have achieved in their own walk of life.
Yeah.
And so it's well recognised that we can sometimes have the most amazing speeches from people who are experts in medicine, in law, in the armed forces, in international relations, in the arts, in sport, in anything you care to mention. The experts are here. And so during a debate on any one of these subjects, you will suddenly find yourself sitting next to someone who really knows what they're talking about. And that is fascinating. But I tell you what's even better. You might be sitting having a cup of tea in the Peers tea room in the afternoon, and you find yourself sitting next to someone, and you don't know who the person is, and someone asks them a question, and you start having a conversation which is just amazing, because this person will have done something incredible. And there you are, sitting next to them, talking about it, just as a matter of course. That's one of the things that's amazing about this place. And whatever happens in modernising it in the future, we absolutely must not lose that amazing diversity and amazing experience that is here in the House of Lords.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's one of the things that's misunderstood about your, not just your role, but you and your colleagues. And I think the media don't really report on it. You see little snippets, even if you watch BBC Parliament, like, political anoraks like you and I do. And that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is lift that lid and actually show people what a wealth of talent and expertise is here.
Yep, that's
and we shouldn't
absolutely
take it for
right.
granted, should we?
We shouldn't take it for granted, and we shouldn't take steps to undermine it.
Yeah.
We should appreciate that Parliament as a whole, as a democratic institution, should reflect the people it purports to represent. And there are different ways of representing the population of the United Kingdom. One of those ways is through standing for election and having people put their cross in a box against your name at an election. But there are lots of other ways in which democracy is enhanced in the modern world. We haven't had pure democracy for centuries. There are ways in which democracy is enhanced, and the appointment of people who have excelled in their own field and who bring experience, understanding, wisdom, learning, bringing them into the democratic process is part of the checks and balances of a modern democracy. And the House of Lords is an amazing institution where that can be done.
Well, totally agree. And there's so many leaders in the Lords. So this kind of neatly leads me to my next question is, how would you define leadership, and what does it mean to you? Have there been any particular leaders that have inspired you on your journey?
Well, that has, for several decades, been an easy question to answer. And I remember it being...
who you might say.
I remember it being asked of me when I was in the final selection at Epping Forest in December 1995, which is a very long time ago. And I was standing up there before a few hundred people, and there were three of us in the final, and I was the third person on. So I later discovered that the two people who had been standing on that stage before me had given completely different answers to mine. And the question was, who is your political hero and your role model? This was 1995. And I remember I said, "Oh, Madam Chairman, that's an easy question for me to answer." I said, "Margaret Thatcher, of course." And the entire audience just clapped.
Hooray.
And I realised that they had also breathed a sigh of relief, because the two other people who were really good people in that final with me had not said Margaret Thatcher. And so
What who they said?
this audience, well, I know what they said, but it's not for me to quote them. They chose other very worthy people, but not great people like Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
And I then knew that my audience, which was Epping Forest Conservative Association, had wanted me to say Margaret Thatcher. I had no hesitation whatsoever in saying Margaret Thatcher. Of course she is my political hero and role model. Of course she is, because first of all, she broke the glass ceiling. She made it impossible for people to say that a woman cannot rise to the top in politics. I was at school when she became leader of the Conservative Party. And until that point, when the careers teacher at school asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, I want to be a politician, they laughed at me. I am not joking, they laughed at me. And the teachers made fun of me in a way which actually today would be unacceptable to treat a child like that. Well, I wasn't a child. I'm not saying I did that as a child. I was about 15. So it was a perfectly reasonable thing to say that I wanted to study law because I was interested in politics. And they laughed at me. But then Margaret Thatcher became leader of the opposition, leader of the Conservative Party. And by the time I left school, she was heading to become Prime Minister. And so people couldn't laugh anymore. They could criticise, I don't mind that, that's the stuff of politics, but they couldn't laugh. And they couldn't say, a woman doesn't do this. They had to say,
She was.
Yep,
Yeah.
a woman does it.
And it changes, doesn't it? It changes the dialogue. I mean, I got involved really because of Theresa May, and
Yes.
for me, that changed the dialogue. People perhaps have said to me, "Oh, you can't do it," but for people of my generation, probably a little bit younger, a little bit older, we had our second female prime minister, and she was getting stuff done.
Absolutely, and in a different way
Yeah.
from the way in which men do things.
Correct.
There's no reason why we would have to say that either men do things better than women or women do things better than men.
Yeah.
But I have long argued, and I first started arguing this publicly when I was Shadow Minister for Women about 20 years ago. I said, women do things differently from men. And what I by that point in my career, in my life, I had the courage to say, no, that's how you do it, but I'm not doing it that way, because that's how you do it because you're a man and that's how you see it. I'm not going to do it that way.
Yeah.
I'm a woman and I do it differently from you. We'll probably reach the same conclusion at the end. We'll probably achieve the same thing. For example, in being an MP, how do you connect with your constituents? Well, as a woman, I did it in a different way from the way men do. I connected with my constituents by meeting people with whom I had something in common, which included standing outside a primary school when, in the 2001 election, I was 7.5 months pregnant on election day. So I had to work out a different way to do it. I couldn't go running up and down streets like a 25-year-old man.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I stood outside primary schools when the schools were coming out, and I handed out my leaflets, and I was very obviously pregnant, and I spoke to women with young children who were picking up their kids from school, and they were amazed. They didn't think they had ever met a member of Parliament who wanted to speak to them as the mothers of young children. So you connect in a different way with different people. And that's part of the diversity of the whole system. That's how democracy ought to work. And for too long, women tried to fit into the mould made by men and it doesn't work. We each have to do things in our own way and play to our own strengths. Um, and and I wish I'd learned that earlier in life.
Well, I can safely reassure you that I do not conform to any mould, and as I'm sure you know already.
Absolutely.
Strong girls club and everything, right?
Absolutely. I remember when my son was about 6 years old and was being encouraged at school to talk about what his parents did, and his daddy's a lawyer, and
Yeah.
blah blah, and he mentioned what his mummy did, and and he was asked the question, so what does an MP do? And my son said, an MP votes and wears a blue suit. I was very proud of him for saying that. I thought he distilled it down quite well.
Very good. All about the
She
button.
wears a blue suit and she votes. That'll do.
I like that. I like that. So you lead a very, very busy life and schedule. How do you balance your work and personal life? So do you do that? And if so, is there sort of a cheat or a habit or a routine that helps you get there?
It's not difficult now, but I don't think I did balance my work and my personal life when I was an MP, especially in the early days. Because the fact is that you're on duty 24/7.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes my son had a difficult time of it. I don't think I did balance my work and private life very well, and no one would blame my ex-husband for getting very fed up with that. So much is expected of you as a member of Parliament, and you have to give it your all. And even the hardest working professional person generally has their own time at the weekends. Mm-hmm. But a member of Parliament is on show at weekends and going places and doing things in your constituency. And of course there is that enormous difficulty that you live and work in two places. This is not appreciated. It's not the same as a successful management consultant having a flat in London and a house in Devon. And that's living in two places. That's by choice. It's completely different. It is that you are living and working in two places. Yeah. And I wish that that was better understood, because it makes it very, very difficult to balance your personal and professional life. Mm-hmm. And for me, when I was an MP, I don't know where my personal life stopped and my professional life started. I cannot distinguish. It was all rolled into one, and it was 24/7. And I enjoyed that. I liked working hard. I liked achieving things for my constituents personally. That's a very important part of an MP's job, which is often not recognised and not talked about. But I have to say that it meant that the time that I had for my family and my friends was much less than it ought to have been.
And so the balance is starting to be shifted.
Oh, it's so different now. The huge difference, of course, is being in the House of Lords. I'm not looking after a constituency. Yeah. And that's a huge difference. I miss my constituency. I miss my constituents. I miss going to schools, but I've moved on to a different stage in life, yeah. And I'm very, very fortunate to be able to continue working in politics as I am doing.
Yeah, so kind of coming to the tough bit of the interview here, is what your colleagues have said to me. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Without a doubt, we touched on this earlier. Yes. Without a doubt, the advice that I would give to my younger self is to be more confident, to be more sure of yourself, and to not let men talk you down just because they're bigger, taller, stronger, louder. Well, actually, they're not louder than me. Just because they're bigger and stronger. And just because in most rooms that I would go into in a professional capacity, when I was in my 20s, 30s, and even 40s, there would be 10 men for every woman. So you're always outnumbered and always sidelined and often patronised, and there is such a thing as mansplaining. Gosh, it's annoying.
It is.
So my advice to my younger self would be to be more confident, because when I look back on many, many things that my male colleague, not just male colleagues, but female colleagues as well, said was the right way to do things, and I didn't think so, and they did them that way, then in the fullness of time, I've often been proved right. And I wish I could have known that and stood up for myself better.
And then, so for women who want to stand for public office, what message do you hope to share with them?
Well, I've had difficulty standing up for myself and having confidence to put my own view when I was outnumbered by those who disagreed with me, but I've never lacked the confidence to stand up for other women, because that is the difference that my generation have made. I find now that I don't have daughters, but I have goddaughters and nieces of whom I am very fond and to whom I'm close, and who are high achieving women and who are going to go on to achieve great things. And when one of my goddaughters said to me, well, yes, Auntie Ellie, as they call me, we can do what we're doing because of what you did to break through. And thank you. And that's one of the nicest things anyone has ever said to me. It makes it all worthwhile to have had the difficulties of being a woman in a man's world. As I said to you, when I was elected to the House of Commons, there were 13 Conservative women. Getting to the stage where there is a critical mass of women in any organisation, that goes for the Commons, the Lords, the Conservative Party, anywhere you care to mention, having a critical mass of women, it doesn't have to be equality, but it has to be enough to make their voice heard and not just be swept aside. And that's the difference that my generation have made.
Yeah. We're here because of you.
I hope so. Yeah. And you see, your generation will go on to do greater and greater things. And if my generation has facilitated that, it's all been worthwhile.
And just to round off, the toughest question you'll be asked today, maybe all week. Can you describe the Lords in one word?
One word for the House of Lords? I think I would say wisdom. The House of Lords embodies wisdom. And I'm just learning that. And I'm the new girl, and I hope that I will develop that wisdom too.
I think you've already got it. So, well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Baroness Laing, for joining us today. And we hope to invite you back to a future episode to talk about the issues that you're working on, and perhaps give a bit more food for thought about those reforms and how the Lords will continue to shape our country. So
I would be delighted to do that. Thank you very much. It's been great fun talking to you.
Thank you. Please like, subscribe and share the podcast, and get in touch if you have any suggestions on who you'd like us and her voice in the house to feature in a future episode. Thanks so much for listening.